Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar event. My name is Josh. I'm going to be your presenter today. And while folks, there are lots of payroll reports. If we go up to reports export, we've got employee contractor reports, a whole list, pay reports, check reports, tax reports. History reports are found here under pay reports, and fourth option down, history report. And again, per the little side arrow there, it brings up a submenu of reports. So we've got our payroll history report, the payees detail hours report, and federal taxable earnings, withholdings, and net pay detail. I think probably what I would qualify or start with by saying is, in terms of my usage of these reports as from a text perspective, I use the federal taxable earnings, withholdings, and net pay detail report to answer support questions with users all the time. The detail hours report is literally as described, and it does detail the hours that either an employee has or they've been paid for, any vacation or PTO or sick time they have available, earned and used, and then the payroll history report is really kind of a summary report, but we're going to go through these. But from top to bottom, the top is the one I use least. The one at the bottom is the one I typically use most. Now, you may find that you have different uses for them, okay? I'm a church windows support technician. You're a payroll administrator. You may have use for the payroll history report more than I do, but that's great. That's what they're here for, okay? So if we go into the payroll history report initially, and this window here under the select payees and date range, that's going to be an option on all of our reports. So in this case, it defaults to 2024, the full year. Okay. You can enter the date range for whatever date range you wish. That's the thing about payroll. I always like to kind of start these report webinars or events by stating that payroll, very similar to the Church Windows Donations module, has no end of year procedure. So you can run virtually any payroll report for any date range you wish. There is nothing in payroll other than the date range that separates one reporting period from the next. So unlike accounting, where it's a very strict, fiscal or calendar profile, and you can't run reports that cross years, in payroll, like donations, you can run it for any period you want. If I want to run it from, July 1st of 23 to June 30th of 24, I can do that. Okay, and it will bring in all of the information, the payroll information within that entered or selected date range, okay? And then this is particularly useful if you're talking about, like, I think my experience tells me that you've got, like, many times, workman's comp or Bureau of Workman's Comp offices want payroll information that doesn't align with, say, the tax year per se. And so payroll will support that wonderfully, okay? And again, if I want to go back to 23, I just click the minus year button right there. Notice it just enters the date range back, the year that I set, and I can keep going back to any period I want, okay? The one thing on this report is, under the payroll history report, is it does only allow us to choose or run it for employees only, not contractors, okay? So notice I cannot click the down arrow even if I have pay information entered in payroll for contractors for the selected period. This report is exclusively run for employees only. I can choose run it for all employees or specific employees, unchecking anybody that I don't want and checking those that I do if I wish. Okay. You can also run it based on a pay type, hourly or salaried, pay period, weekly, biweekly, semi-monthly, monthly, quarterly, or any departments that you or I may have set up. Okay. And again, folks, the important thing to keep in mind about this is that you can use any combination of these that you wish. So if you've got different departments of hourly employees, you can uncheck salaried, maybe leave weekly, or uncheck them and then run them per particular, uncheck all and run it for a particular, department if you wish. So just a means of being able to select your employees that you're wanting. But we're going to check them all for everybody. I can include on the report for archived payees or terminated payees as well. And report format, grand totals only, essentially, for all employees or payees for the respective period. I can choose per payee to run a separate report for them. If I want to run them on a separate page or print them, I can check page break on each payee. Just allows you to see those different payee information completely separately. Not checking page break on each payee will still detail each payee's pay information for the period. It just doesn't put a page break between it, okay, or separate it to a different page. It just does employee A. When that ends, then it goes to employee P. Let's look at it and see what it looks like. So when we go to print, so it says Larry, here's his. I only have information, folks, through quarter one. Then totals, then it goes into the next employee, etc. Okay, as opposed to if I do page break on each payee, it now does Larry on page one, then on page two it goes to Jimmy, then on page three it goes to Steve, etc. Okay, so again, it's how do you want to see the information? Let's look at the report. Let's do totals only. What this report does is it breaks down basically the payroll information for the selected period by month, quarter, and year. This report never breaks it down by each paycheck, okay? It only details it by month, quarter, or year, or annual. So notice it shows gross pay. And an important question before questions come in about it is, Josh, what are the parenthetic amounts here? If we look down at the legend at the bottom, it says amount in parentheses is gross taxable amount for deduction appearing above it. So essentially it would be the reported wages, okay? Gross taxable wages. So again, just an FYI, that's broken down by each period, in this case month, January, February, March, and again for Social Security wages, Medicare wages, federal taxable wages, state wages, local, etc. Folks are going, well, why would my Social Security and Medicare wages be so drastically different from federal? Folks, we're a church, remember, ministers are not reporting or withholding Social Security and Medicare taxes or wages, are not reporting those. So those amounts are going to be typically the amounts minus my minister's wages and Social Security monies, because they're not reporting here, okay? But again, a useful summary report when broken down, if it helps, by month, quarter, and then for the year. So when I have more payrolls further in the year, later in the year, I'll get January through March, quarter one, then April through June, quarter two, et cetera, and then my totals, grand totals at the end of the year. As with all of our reports, folks, the report summary at the bottom details what we've asked for. So had I limited it to a particular different date range or a select employees, it would show that if I had only selected, say, hourly or salaried or particular pay period or department, okay? As I said, I find this report useful sometimes, okay, but not as often. I'll go through the next here. So let's go now. Let's close this. Well, and again, if you do per payee and I just find for the webinars, page break on each payee is helpful because it allows you to see it separately, even though it's technically the same. So again, further proof of what I was stating before, that Larry Higgins is my senior minister. Notice no Social Security and Medicare wages or withholding, only federal taxable withholding they've opted for, and wages to be reported for federal, state, and local, and or miscellaneous if applicable, but nothing for Social Security. When I now go down to a lay person, we see here Jimmy Hilliard is now a lay person, and he absolutely is reporting Social Security, Medicare, withholding amounts and wages for boxes 3, 4, 5, and 6, okay? So just be aware that's the main difference between those two, okay? And again, we've got Steve, another minister, again, nothing reporting in Social Security or Medicare, okay? All right, let's go to the next report. So we go up to reports, history report, and payees detail hours report. Similar type date range selection. These, however, you can run it for contractors versus employees. I do not have one for all payee types, like what I think we'll see on the next, under the federal taxable earnings report. I can't run them together, but I can run it separately. So we're going to choose employees again for, in this case there, for specific, pay type, pay period, department, report totals only or per payee. Because this details the employee's hours specifically, okay, I find that on my support calls, I more often than not run this per payee and with page break on each payee. Also, important distinction, depending on if and how you record paid time off, whether that's PTO or vacation or sick time, whatever, you can have this report PTO in days. Otherwise, it defaults to reporting it in hours. Okay? So why that's important is because the software presumes it's a 40-hour work week and a 5-day work week. So basically 8 hours equates to 1 day. Okay? So if I do page break on each payee and click print, it shows in this case, see Larry, my senior pastor, no regular hours. Why? Because he has no hours. He's a salaried employee. He has 160 hours of PTO to start the year, so nothing is accumulating or earned. He's not used any at this point, and therefore all of it is available. Okay? And it says right here, all time is reported in hours. If we close out and we change that to report in days, this should now show what? 20, correct. So it is doing it correctly. And if I did have PTO that had been used anytime in this first quarter, it would show that. And then under available, it would take that earned amount, subtract the used, and that would be the PTO available. Now, folks, you may have multiple pay labels for these. If that's the case, then by all means, it's going to show those, okay? But this really is an important question, even though these are summarized on the employee's pay stubs, if I recall correctly. I'm talking about PTO or time off. This just allows you to examine it in complete detail, okay? Notice here it says paid time off for this label, for this payee does not accumulate, meaning these are values we've assigned to our payees to start the year. They're not amounts that they earn with each successive paycheck. If vacation or PTO were accumulating, then I would show amounts under PTO earned with each paycheck. That's just not how we've chosen to set this up. Okay? But really important report if you're wanting to see where payees or employees lie with regards to their not only regular pay, but perhaps their time off, vacation, sick time, what have you. Okay? All right. Now, the final report, a big dog, I call this one because this is the one I use all the time on my support calls. Federal taxable earnings, withholdings, and net pay detail. Okay, so this report does break down the pay date, okay? So again, the report format over here of totals only per payee or page break on each payee does become vitally important. This will summarize it by each pay date. So if I just choose, say, now again, notice all payee types, employees, and contractors. If I'm wanting to parallel this with my tax documents, things like my 941 or my W-2s, definitely we're not going to want to choose all payee types. You'd want to choose employees omitting contractors. Okay? So let's do that. Again, standard type selections. But if I do this, and let's say I've only got pay through March 31st, I would put it through 03/31 from 1/1, click print. It will now show each one of my pay dates, first, 15th, middle of the month, and the final day of the month broken down. And it spreads out the information, folks, across the screen horizontally. Earnings without allowances, taxable allowances, non-taxable deductions, federal taxable compensation. This report really does help answer questions that you have about maybe 941 totals for the period, or maybe amounts that are appearing on, say, an employee's W-2 form. Okay, this report really does break this down for each employee really, really wonderfully. And so that's why I use this report a lot, is because And it'll even tell me, I don't have anything in the data here, but if there's a little asterisk that appears, the footnote indicates, it'll usually say, indicates changes to a taxable status of an allowance or a deduction, and an asterisk will appear because somebody set something up incorrectly and then they changed it mid-year, so that little asterisk will tell us that something in the data changed mid-year, okay? Now again, this is all employees, but the federal taxable compensation column here, federal withholding, these amounts, Social Security and Medicare amounts, these all check out with my 941 for quarter one, okay? That it's literally as described. Federal taxable earnings, withholdings, and net pay detail for the requested period, okay? So if I were to go in and run even now the official 941 form is unavailable yet, folks, it's coming. Atrix will have it out at some point. But if I go to tax reports and I go to, say, quarterly 940 draft 941 form, I do 2024 Q1, then go, yep, that's my total deposits for the period. Notice right there, $49,035.18, my wages, tips, and other compensation checks out exactly with that federal taxable earnings history report, as does the federal income tax withheld, okay? So again, really, really useful and helpful report to help answer questions about tax documents for employees or for the church in the case of, say, the 941 form. But this is the part that I also wanted to show as well, is when we do per payee and page break on each payee, it will allow us to, I got my contractor. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I should have just chosen payees. Contractors, though, you can answer questions about contractors with this report as well, okay? But if I now go to print, Larry's going to come up. Here he is. So, notice here it shows he's got some non-taxable deductions, probably pension or health insurance or something. And he's got no taxable allowances, but over here he's got non-taxable allowances, likely housing. He's got no Social Security and Medicare withheld, no miscellaneous, no taxable deductions. So again, this really does help answer questions that you have, not only about the general reporting numbers on tax documents for the church, but for individual and in separate employees, okay? Federal taxable compensation equates to line 1 on the W-2. Federal withholding is box 2 on the W-2 form. So when I run those reports, if I were to run those for quarter 1, even the draft copy, I would expect those totals to show in box 1 and box 2 respectively, okay? And finally over here, you've got the net check amount for the employee and a check number if applicable, or if they were paid via direct deposit or EFT, okay? This is one of my most effective and useful and helpful reports that I use as a Church Windows tech when trying to answer user questions for payroll. Take them right to this report, and I either run it for the individual employee that they have a question about, or I run it for quarter 1. And here we are in the early part of March. I'm anticipating using this report a lot when we get the first quarter's 941 comes out to try to help users answer their questions. Okay, I'm sorry, folks, I went a minute long. That is where I'm going to leave this topic for today.